And so to France. After many years of trying, the Automobile Club of Normandy had at last got the finance together to wrest the French Grand Prix away from the flat-out circuit of Reims and bring it to the infinitely more challenging Rouen circuit, a circuit made up of public roads in Les Essarts forest, a few miles south of the town. Britain started the day well when Ron Flockhart won the Coupe Delamere de Bouteville in John Coombs's Lotus 11. The American Lotus distributor, J. Chamberlain, brought the Works Team Lotus car home in second place. Whilst a pretty little jet turbine-powered Renault whistled around the 6.5-kilometre circuit on a demonstration tour, 14 factory cars and Horace Gould's private Maserati assembled for the Grand Prix. Fangio had been magnificent in practice. Seeing the circuit for the first time, the old man had rubbed his hands with glee and said, "This is the one for me." He then proceeded in a series of beautifully controlled 30-degree power slides to lap over a second quicker than anybody else. The master was still the master, and at the age of 46, still capable of showing the youngsters how to go motor racing. The bad news from the British point of view was that the Vanwalls were lining up at the back of the grid. Sterling Moss was ill in bed with a nasal virus, and Tony Brooks had not recovered from the injuries he'd sustained at Le Mans when he rolled his DBR1 Aston on the sandbank at Tertre Rouge whilst trying to find a gear other than fourth, and was pinned underneath the wreckage. So Vanwall were forced to rely on stand-in drivers, Roy Salvadori, who had torn up his BRM contract, and Stuart Lewis Evans, who'd been borrowed from Ferrari. So as the drivers, led by Musso and Fangio, came down to be presented to the crowd, we reviewed the grid positions. Fangio was on pole, with Maserati teammate Berra, and Musso in the fastest Ferrari, sharing that front row. The two cars on row 2 were to be the Maserati of Harry Schell and the Ferrari of Peter Collins. On the third row was Roy Salvadori, who'd pushed the Vanwall along half a second quicker than the Ferraris of Hawthorne and Trintignant. On row 4 there was Menditege and Lewis Evans in the second Vanwall, and then came the two BRMs, two Coopers and Gould's Maserati. Jean Berra was creeping when the flag fell, so he was able to lead the field away. A swarm of red cars, followed by a rather smaller swarm of green ones. The blue of France is now absent, with Gordini having left the Grand Prix scene, as sadly have Connaught. At the end of the first lap, Musso led for Ferrari, with the 250Fs of Berra and Fangio on his tail. Amazingly, up in 6th place came a BRM, driven by the American Mackay Fraser. Bringing up the rear, the Maserati of Horace Gould. Next time round, Fangio had edged ahead of Berra and was challenging Musso. Meanwhile, Salvadori had slid wide, out in the country, and spilled oil. He called at the pits for the filler cap to be closed, but Flockhart had spun on that same oil, written off his BRM, and injured his leg. Salvadori rejoined at the back of the field, accelerating down the hill with its high-speed curves to the hairpin at Nouveau Monde. Next to call at the pits was Jack Brabham, who was forced to retire his Cooper with bent rear suspension after a mix-up with Horace Gould when Gould's rear axle seized. Gould, too, had to come in to retire. Hawthorne's pit crew signalled that he was running in 7th place and embroiled in a neck-and-neck battle with Mackay Fraser in the BRM. Fangio now had a comfortable lead, with Musso 2nd and Collins 3rd in Ferrari number 12. Berra and Schell completed the top 5. Next to visit the pits was French hope Maurice Trintignant. His Ferrari's Magneto was on the blink. Hawthorne was now having to fight off Lewis Evans's Vanwall as well as the BRM, as the Ferrari mechanics continued to work on Trintignant's car. The pannier tanks on these Lancia-derived cars have now seemingly gone forever. Salvadori must have overstretched his Vanwall's engine in that earlier incident, for he was shortly to retire. And although rejoining the race now, Trintignant too would be forced out by the same recalcitrant Magneto. Out too had gone Mackay Fraser, but not before this newcomer had shown how well the BRM could handle on a circuit where it matters most. And if this young American was indeed a new talent, it was sadly wasted, as he was killed in a Lotus just a week later at the Reims Formula 2 race. Jack Brabham had now rejoined, driving McDowell's Cooper, and was soldiering along at the back of the field, this power circuit not suiting the Cooper as well as Monaco had done in May. Fangio was superb at the head of the field as he drifted through the downhill right-hand swerve after the pits. Only Collins had applied any pressure on the Maestro, setting new lap records on laps 25 and 26, only for Fangio to eclipse that record by 2/10 immediately afterwards. Collins's gearbox was now playing up, so that put an end to record breaking, and he lost his second place to Musso. In fourth came Behra, suffering from a cracked exhaust pipe and being caught by an off-form Hawthorne, who in turn was ahead of a slowing Shell, who was nursing his overheated Maserati to the finish. On lap 44, Jean Behra, his cockpit clouded in exhaust fumes and drenched in oil, lost his fourth place to Hawthorne, who was already a lap down on Fangio, and from then on, for the remaining 33 laps, no one overtook anybody. I compared styles on the downhill approach to the Nouveau Monde hairpin. Hawthorne, Collins, Behra. As the race drew to a close, and with just 7 cars still running, I wandered back to the pits area, as Hawthorne continued on in 4th place. Fangio had a 28-second advantage over Musso, whose hopes rose when there was talk of Fangio having to stop to change a badly worn rear tyre. Luigi speeded up and set a new lap record, only to throw it all away by spinning at Nouveau Monde. But it didn't matter, because Fangio didn't stop in any case. Behra couldn't stand his unpleasant driving conditions a moment longer, so he just waited at his pit, ready to push his Maserati over the line to claim his 5th place. So Fangio brought home his Maserati to an undisputed win ahead of 3 Ferraris of Musso, Collins and Hawthorne. Hawthorne, with his lackluster performance, was ignored by the press and the crowd as they converged on Fangio. With 3 wins from 3 starts, his 5th world title was looking assured.